All right, hi everybody. My name is Cliff Massey Jr., and welcome to When Passion Calls. My guest today is a licensed professional counselor and a published fiction author. Her book, the young adult novel Mirroring Effect, tells the gripping story of a young teenage girl, Desi, who is dealing with the passing away of her older sister. She has also recently had an opinion piece published in the Memphis Commercial Appeal entitled Women in Mental Health, Unmasking the Pain. You can find her online at her website, thecnnash.com. She is also online at YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. CN Nash, welcome, and thank you for joining me on When Passion Calls.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. I was doing some research on you, obviously, and I want to start with I am a quote monger. I love quotes.
Okay.
And all over your site, all over everything, I know where I'm going with this,
Yes.
is the quote, in order to feel tears of joy, you must be willing to cry. I
Yes.
absolutely love that. I just want you to talk about it a little bit and explain what that
That
means to you.
actually came on the spur of the moment. So I'll share this is so funny. So me and this friend, this was like years ago, and we would used to go back and forth and stuff. He's a writer, he writes and stuff, and so we would just go back and forth on like a little, a verbal slayage or whatever. And I just remember just flat out just saying something, and then I ended it in order. Like, yes, I remember just spitting it out. And I was like, where in the world did this come from? It wasn't nothing but God, quite honestly. But spitting it out, I was like, wait a minute. I'm like using it to him. And God was saying, no, I need you to actually take that, put it on your heart. And that's pretty much has been my motto, especially when it comes to counseling,
Right,
is that in order to, experience the goodness, you got to be willing to deal with the bad too. You got to be
right.
willing to deal with the hardness. You got to be willing to deal with the challenges and stuff in order. And I think it's been, and we can get into this a little bit later, but I found
Hmm.
that when you do actually go through stuff, that's what makes the tears, sweeter.
Yeah,
So
for
yeah.
sure, for sure. All right. Now, this show is all about passion and purpose, living the life that you want to live. So, and looking at you, you seem to have two passions in your life, mental health and writing.
Yes.
And I was looking at your social media. One of the things I talk to people about is self-identifying with your passion, not necessarily with, if you're working a job, but you're trying to get going with your passion, you need to self-identify with that passion and not necessarily the job. And you're kind of in a different situation, but of these two, it seems like you kind of split. Like some social media, you say you're a writer. Some say you're a licensed professional. Which one do you identify with more? Is there more, or how does that work for you?
So how it works is I like to integrate both so they actually flow. But if I had to say introduce myself first, I would introduce myself actually as an author, which kind of throws
Hmm.
people off because they think I would identify as a licensed professional counselor first.
Hmm.
And so how I introduce myself is I will say I'm an author with a background in mental health counseling.
Okay.
My title is I'm a licensed professional counselor. However, I say a licensed professional, a licensed mental health professional, just
Hmm.
because I do a little bit that's different. My work is a little bit different now. So my background is in counseling, and I guess we can just get into it. So
Hmm.
I've been in January. I was actually thinking about this in January, March, 13 years I've been in counseling, and I was like,
Okay.
wow. And so I've been doing this for a while, and it was actually last year and part of my background too is I'm spiritual, so that's a lot that you'll
Hmm.
see flow through, and we'll talk about that. But was in my journey was a challenge to step out, and so it started last year. And so little by little, I started stepping away from, I guess you would say, the traditional kind of work,
Hmm.
and started transitioning till this year. I actually transitioned fully into my role as a author. So that's my main thing. It's always been my goal to be a full-time author and then be a
Okay.
part-time therapist or a counselor or consultant. And that's where God has put me in a new direction. Is essentially is manifesting right as we speak. And so this year has been about a transition. But yeah, but I
Cool.
the thing is I want to incorporate both because I don't see the distinction. I mean, I don't see like the separation or distinction between the two, and that's I
Hmm.
think is my niche. So I can write just because I am an author. I have the creativity to do so. However, what I write about is actually I'm not pulling it out of thin air. This is like I'm actually experienced
Right.
licensed to write on the specific topic I am. A lot of times people may naturally think, oh, well, why don't you do nonfiction? And
Mm-hmm.
no, I wanted to do something completely different. And
Mm-hmm.
so I guess that I'm a quote person, nobody puts baby in the box. That's me, like, no, what, I'm going to do something new. And so, and the beauty about this, I get to define the terms. I get to
Right.
define what I
Exactly.
put out there. And so, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you will see a combination of both because that really is me. I'm an
Mm-hmm.
author and I'm a therapist still.
Right.
So
Oh, that's
yeah.
fantastic. That's it, and that's exactly what comes across. I was going to say, reading your book is no way that you're definitely an author. You're definitely,
Thank
because
you.
you said people would say mental health professional first, but no, I see author first when I read what you write. There are certain, because you read people who are talented and who can write, but then there are people who just have the gift, and you definitely have it.
Yeah.
And when I'm reading when I'm reading your words, I'm like, this is somebody who was born to write.
Thank you.
So it's fantastic. How did you? Let's start with as a mental health professional. How did you start with your? How did you start finding that you had a passion for that? Where did that
So
come from?
yeah, so mental health was always fascinating. So I've always been that person that liked to people watch.
Okay.
So I used to be like, so especially in the malls, so I used to always be, and it's just a fascination with people. So my background, I moved around a few times. And so that led me to be kind of cross paths with a lot of different people who I
Mhm.
probably never would have met before. And so I got exposed to just different personalities. And I found myself gelling with people that I never thought I would gel with, right? And
Mhm.
so I became really, really fascinated with just people and interactions and how people, how they behave and what motivates them. And
Mhm.
so that kind of evolved. Like I remember in high school, too, I always had friends be like, they would come from to me for advice. And so
Right.
that kind of naturally grew to, I actually, I kind of like this. I kind of enjoy this. And I actually like people, even though I would say I'm an extroverted introvert. I
Mhm.
actually do when it's one-on-one, I really get into the interactions and I had a passion for people. And so that motivated me to I went to UT, University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and I got
Okay.
my bachelor's in psychology and loved it. I went immediately and started working out in the field as a family specialist, and
Mhm.
I loved it because it was pure counseling. And I what I loved most was, especially back in East Tennessee, and even still, we can talk about how taboo mental health really still is.
Right.
Um, it was it was a way to bring it was an opportunity to address the misconceptions about counseling and mental health.
Mhm.
Right off the bat, people are like, well, I'm not crazy. Well, nothing's wrong with me. And I'm like, no, nothing's wrong with you.
Right.
You're human. Come on. And it was a way for me to open up a door to, but help them at the same time.
Mhm.
And so that led me, I was like, okay, you know what? I really am passionate about this. So of course I went on and pursued my master's. And from there I got licensed. So I'm independently licensed in the state of Tennessee to practice and
Mhm.
diagnose. And so it just evolved. The different settings. So I worked with my youngest has been 4, my oldest has been
Mhm.
in their 60s, 70s and stuff. And I find that I gravitate towards the teens. I don't know why.
Gotcha.
Teen girls. I don't know why, but it's in my writing. I love working with teen girls. Though that's my passion. I think because I was a teen girl, and so I
Mhm.
feel their angst, and their little anguish.
Mhm.
Oh, because that was me too. And so it kind of evolved from there to like this is what I really like doing. I love pouring into people. I love I love being a support. I love though the ability to help them discover their talent, help them discover who they are, help
Yeah.
them discover, that wait a minute, I have the innate ability to help myself.
Mhm.
I say, as far as a therapist, I'm not an expert. I don't know all of life's answers. I'm still trying to figure out life myself. However, I do have a set of skills.
Mhm.
And so what I love is being able to connect those people to to those skills so they can actually heal themselves. And I get to go along for the ride, like this is awesome. And so that's
Right.
how the mental health part came about. And I knew I just
Gotcha.
wanted to continue with mental health, especially dealing with this stigma, especially in the minority community and in the Christian community specifically. That's what
Mhm.
I do, just because we don't like talking about mental health in general. But there's also this stigma that, I can't, deal with life just because I have Jesus. And I kind of like
Right.
challenge that a little bit, you know. So it's been a
hmm
great opportunity to be a support to people. So that's kind of how that
Yeah.
is.
That's really cool. That's one of the things I wanted to bring up. A quick story about myself. I'm married. We've been together for about 18 years now. But
Congratulations.
thank you. But my first wife and I, we were together about 7 years, and we lost two kids.
Mm,
She had an abnormally shaped uterus, and the kids could only survive like 5 months, and they died like right before they were viable, and worst time of my life, and it shook my faith big time. And the reason I bring it up is because something has bothered me since then, and this happened again about 20 years ago. No one offered us counseling.
mm,
And it always bothered me that nobody, I would think that that would be something that you would automatically assume someone would need counseling for.
mhm.
And it touched me from back in the day when I first got your business card. I looked you up and I saw some videos you had done, and you were talking about this stigma, raising awareness. And that's something that's always been close to my heart because of what happened to me. And I like the idea of eradicating the stigma
Mhm.
of that. I tell people all the time, um, if you went through all these crazy things and you weren't abnormal, you'd be abnormal.
Yes.
When you go through
Yes.
crazy stuff, if you're a normal person and you see somebody get shot, you should get messed up. If you
Thank you.
don't, then something's
Yes.
wrong.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Yes.
yeah, I love that you're bringing this to light, and that's
Yes.
really cool. You kind of talked. I was going to ask you about it, but you kind of talked about that part of it, and I just wanted to say I really like that you bring that to light. It's really really cool
It's
that
real.
somebody's doing that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I love it because it's real. This is real. I believe in transparency. I believe in just the realness of it, the humanity of it, and just yeah, I thank you for mentioning that. Like, and I say life happens,
hmm
so life doesn't discriminate. On the same token, that's how I look at mental health. Mental health doesn't discriminate. Mental health doesn't say, "Oh, I'm not going to choose you, but I'm going to choose you." No, mental health say, "I'm going to take you if I can get you,"
Right.
and that's because of life. Because life says, "I'm not going to choose you and not choose you." No, I'm going to take you if I can get you. Life happens to us all, and it's only you're exactly right. Like if even if to endure certain things, which we all have to have our own, stories, to not, be affected or impacted by that, no,
Right.
you're gonna be impacted, right?
Right.
So that's thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And that's why I am big on combining the two with spirituality and counseling. Everything I do it's a is to challenge, so when we're talking about stigmas, oh well, for example, well, black people ain't don't get that. Let me show you some stats on that,
Right.
so like, oh well, spiritual people, well, I got Jesus. Yeah, you got Jesus too, but guess what, I'm here too. We can work together. This is not a either or type
Right.
situation. No, and so that's one thing I do like is I've been able to challenge these preconceived notions, these misperceptions, that
Right.
comes with mental health. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, now let's talk about your fiction writing.
Yes.
How did that develop? The passion
Okay,
for that.
so I've been writing, and I think that's why I do say I'm an author first. I've been writing since I was a kid,
hmm
and I'll give this story so hilarious. Was how it all started. Is I was locked out of my house because I forgot my key.
hmm
So my mom, single parent working and stuff. So we had, latch key. We had the keys
Right.
or whatever. But I'm young. I left my key, and so I went across to my neighbor's house, and I had to wait on my mom. So I was sitting by the door, which overlooks our yard, and there was a tree planted in our yard. We just planted a tree, and I just said, "Oh, let me write about this tree." And it's like this. It really silly. I'm a tree, as happy as can be. That silly type of poem.
hmm
But I remember showing it to my mom, and my mom, of course, biggest cheerleader. That baby, my baby. And so
Awesome.
I remember thinking, I kind of like this. And so not only that, but I remember I've always had a journal. Ever since I was little, I had shown my age here. Lisa Frank was back in my day. I had the Lisa Frank journals, diaries and stuff, and I used to with the lock and keys and all that stuff, and I took that
hmm
stuff seriously. But I've always written as a way to express myself. I always it was a way to me. A lot of times when I have a lot of thoughts and I'm trying to make sense of what I'm going through, especially even my emotions, I recognize as soon as I put it on paper and I read it back, even as if a story, it made sense. And
Okay.
so that went into narration of let me people watch and let me see what's their story. Let me write about their story.
Mhm.
Let me say, okay. And that's how kind of my stories evolved. I always loved English. I always loved, lit. I always loved those type of classes versus your math and science. And it was because
Mhm.
it was a way to express myself. I was always that first one to get up and say, let me read, you
Mhm.
know? And that's kind of how it evolved until I actually started so just started writing. Just it would start with little chapters here and there until I came up with the idea of mirror and effect. And that's gave birth to that. And I do want to share kind of like what led to mirror and effect
Mhm.
was I remember, and this is I was an adult. I was in actually in grad school, and I remember I was in this meeting with a bunch of women and looking up and thinking, where are we? Are we in high school? I'm like, what's going on? And so this concept spawned where I wanted to talk about passive aggressiveness, where I wanted to
Mhm.
talk about women and how we interact with each other. I wanted to kind of talk about that with Mirror and Effect. However, what happened was I started going through life. I started doing my own things. And the book evolved into what you're seeing today, where we're talking about grief, we're talking
Mhm.
about depression. I went through my own state of depression. I went through
Mhm.
grieving. At one point, I started losing family members like back to back to back, and I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of confusion, and again,
Mhm.
going back to how I process is all right. And so the book really evolved into me saying, "This is what I got. This is what I'm feeling. Let me put it down and see if it makes sense." And that's how
Mhm.
Mirror and Effect came to be.
Oh, that's really cool.
Mm.
All right. Um, so you're going too fast. You're going ahead of where I wanted to be right now. Let me do this right quick, and then we're gonna get back to mirroring effect because I have some
Okay.
stuff I want to talk to you about that with that.
Okay.
Um, Writing.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the thing that you love most. Like, what are the moments in writing that you love the most, where you really really feel the passion of it.
It is. I compare writing to cooking.
Okay.
When you're searching for that perfect ingredient and you find that perfect ingredient and you put it in, let's say you're baking a cake and you find this perfect vanilla spice or whatever.
Mhm.
And you're like, I've been searching, I finally found it, and I know it's gonna make it complete. I compare it to cooking in the sense that when you're searching for that right word to express or describe something, and
Mhm.
you search and you search and you search and you find it. I'm a word nerd. I
Right.
love a thesaurus. I love a thesaurus. I love everything about words, and I love how we can use it to form expressions.
Mhm.
And so, what I like most is the freedom in finding that perfect word and then linking it with another word to another word. And I'm conveying something that in my head didn't make a lick of sense. But as soon as I put it on paper, I got something.
Right.
I love the freedom that comes with the creativity. I prefer fiction over nonfiction.
Mhm.
Never say that I would never do nonfiction, but I love the freedom it comes with expressing because I can make it up. It's truth in my book.
Mhm.
I can do whatever I want. It's my story. I can narrate it. And I love that challenge. So I think, does that answer your question?
Oh, that's exactly what I was looking for. Yeah. That's the cool thing about this. One of the main reasons I wanted to do this show is this right here. This is like the most important part for me because I want people. There's so many people living, and again, I'm kind of getting away from where I wanted to be, but that's okay. So many people who are living life just spinning their wheels.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if you could grasp what it feels like to do something that you're passionate about, why would you not want to live your day,
Yeah.
your week, your month, your year like that? Why would you not want to live a passionate life? And I feel like everybody should. I
Yes.
mean, all it sounds utopian, but if everybody was working through their passions and living their passions, you'd have crime going down, you'd have poverty going down, you'd
Yes.
have people would be getting along better, you wouldn't have police shootings, you wouldn't need so many police, you wouldn't have wars. I think that's what this is all about, just
Yeah.
getting to as many people as possible and getting them to understand, live your passion,
Yeah.
find it and go for it.
Yeah.
And when I'm talking to people like you and they see that, because when you start talking, you light up. I call it the click. It's like the click comes, it's the light bulb goes off.
Yeah.
And I love talking to people about their passion
Yeah.
because when it goes
Yeah.
off, I just sit back and watch. And
Yeah.
it's just like watching a fireworks show. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
No, thank
And
you.
And then you're a charismatic person anyway, so it like adds to it. So it's really cool. And now let's talk again about you have two passions. So what's your favorite part of your mental health um,
The
side of it?
people connecting. Um, I love it when you talk about that click. I love it when people embrace where they are. I
Hmm.
love it when people say, wait a minute, it's not that something's wrong with me. This is just me going through life. This is me being human. And you know what? I'm not alone. I love it when that light bulb clicks off because when I say to witness somebody who's wearing like 100-pound weights,
Hmm.
and you see the moment when they take it off, they choose to take it off. That right there gets me every time. Do you see the connection I get to have with people? Well, we're just transparent. I call it shooting the breeze. I really call counseling shooting the breeze.
Hmm.
Um, we talk. Don't worry. We get into some nitty gritty stuff. And stuff, and we, depending on what they're going through. However, it's just relating. It's that relatability, it's that connection, and it's to see them be empowered to walk their own walk and do what they
Hmm.
need to do. That's what I think I enjoyed the most about that.
Hmm. Was there ever a time when you thought of doing something else?
Oh yeah. So wanted to be pre-med. Again, there should have been a factor that I loved English more than math and science, right? So that should have been like,
Gotcha.
uh-uh. But I wanted to be because my goal was I wanted to be a psychiatrist at first.
Okay.
Yeah, inorganic chemistry kicked my butt, and I said, no, I'm gonna do something else. So
That's
I'm not ashamed to
awesome.
say that you're not good at everything. But I think
Right.
that's something I just got to embrace. I'm not good at everything. So yeah, I wanted to be. I actually I love cooking, so I saw myself being culinary, artist. I am bubbly, so I always love drama and theatrics and stuff like that.
Mm.
And I so even like, oh, maybe I should be an actress. There's a lot of things that I thought about doing, but I realized it all connected back to people, and it all connected back to writing in some form
Gotcha.
and
Hmm.
some type of creativity. So yeah, but no,
That's
there
cool.
was some trial and errors.
Hmm. You seem to have figured it out earlier than most, though, which is really,
Isn't
really
it
cool
like,
to see.
it's not working, and the thing is, I'm actually very, I would say, persistent. So
Mm.
I'm stubborn. And so, no, sometimes I was like, you know what, because the fact that it took me that long in math and science, taking all these classes, no, part of that was a little stubbornness there.
Hmm.
But no, after a while, I was like, you know what, it really does go back to the passion. What fills you up? What
Right.
runs my car? What puts the gas in the tank where I'm like, okay, I can go? And at
Hmm.
the end of the day, when you are comparing what fills your cup versus what doesn't, after a while, it gets really, really old. It gets really, really
Yeah.
tiring. And you're like, you know what? I can't do this. I don't have the energy versus
Hmm.
to actually be where your cup is getting full. It's like natural. Like I don't even have to do
Right.
half the work, because it's just I'm flowing because it's a
Exactly.
natural part of me. So yeah.
That's really cool. All right. Now let's start. I guess start with mental health. What's been your like biggest win in your mental health side of your seeking your passion? What's the thing that happened that you like your greatest accomplishment to you?
Definitely get my license. Graduating from grad school, because it was a really hard program.
Hmm.
That program taught me about diplomacy. That program taught me about politics. But it still taught me about mental health and counseling, the things I learned. But
Hmm.
definitely my licensure, just because when I say you're on this journey and you're on this track to try and do something, and you're like, is this ever going to happen? And to finally get that piece of paper, which is so funny, to finally get that piece of paper, it was like and it's like, okay, what's next?
That's great.
Okay, I got it. Okay, it reminds me of, I don't know, okay. So I like quotes. I love movies. I don't know if you ever watch Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, not Willy Wonka and the Chocolate, but Charlie and the Chocolate
Oh
Factory
yeah, yeah,
with the
yeah.
salt. And she's
Yes.
like, she finally got the golden ticket, and she's like, I want a horse, Daddy.
Yeah.
That was really me. Like, oh, okay, what's next?
Yep.
But I remember that joy because that was right smack dab when I started going through the deaths really, really quickly.
Right.
I lost two back to back. So I remember I lost my great grandmother, and then I lost my dog. That's why I had to get a shout out to my dog, because I was like, that was my baby.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I started losing other family members and stuff. So that was definitely that year, the highlight of my year, because I was dealing with a lot of just struggles. a lot of headbutts, a lot of transitions in some relationships. And that definitely was the highlight of that year, I can say.
That's really cool. And then what's been your greatest win with writing?
The fact that I published this book. Okay. So um the thing is, sometimes you get on a journey and it does not look like how you thought it was going to look when you first started that journey. When I first, as soon as I finished the book, I wanted to go the traditional route. I wanted to find an agent and I wanted to just do it that way. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get this agent. And I came close actually. I actually had this agent who was interested. She wanted revisions and stuff. And I'll talk about that part later,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of happened with that. But I kept getting rejections after rejections after rejections. And so I sat on that book. So now we can talk. So instead of making the revisions, I don't know, I do know why. Fear. I sat on that book for years, years, because fear immobilizes. Like, you know what? Maybe I'm not good. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
this is not what I'm supposed to do. That doubt, creeps in and stuff. And you're like, what am I doing? And so I put the book down. And then a couple of years ago, a friend, like shout out to supports, a friend said, you need to come on, get serious now. You really need to put this book out. You really need to go ahead and do this. And so at that point, I was like, well, how do I do this? The traditional route didn't work. What are the options? So I had to get creative. And I discovered that traditional is not the only route to do it. In fact, there are a lot of bonuses and benefits that come to self-publishing. So I started researching into self-publishing. I started trying to really figure out, how do I do this? Because I'm a creative person, not a business person. So I'm like, how am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to be an entrepreneur? Like, what is that? And through that process, I discovered a lot about myself I did not know I had in me.
Mm-hmm.
And I published the book. I self-published the book. And that has to be the biggest win, because what looked like defeat in the beginning, I got victory in it. I did
Right.
exactly what I wanted to do. And the freedom that came with self-published, the things, like I said, there's
Mm-hmm.
both perks on traditional and perks of self-published. I got to keep all the perks of being self-published. The vision of my book exactly how I wanted it. I
Right.
had this vision in my head. I was like, no, I know it's going to be this girl. She's looking in the mirror. I want the mirror to have, and I was able to execute that and get exactly what I want. I was able to take time and really make sure that the words that were in the book were the words I wanted to be in the book. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I got to be in charge of how I wanted the book to come out, where I wanted the book to go. That has to be my biggest win, because all in all, I realized that I had these talents that I've been sleeping on. I had these skills
Mm-hmm.
that I've been sleeping on. That's definitely got to be the biggest win.
That's really cool. All right. And this is one I want to talk more about the book. There's when I was in I was in business school,
Mm,
and there was a book called The Goal,
mm,
um, that was written. It was a management-oriented novel. Okay.
mm,
It was basically a textbook that taught management concepts that were happening in real life. It was a fictional novel, but it was used as a textbook. I
mm.
bring that up because it put me in mind of mirroring effect.
Okay.
Okay. Um, from the structure of the table of contents to the way you wrote, the engaging descriptive style, it seems like it should be required reading for mental health professionals. And I looked at your reviews on Amazon, all 5 stars, by the way. Just throw that out there.
Thank you.
And and I saw that a lot. I saw 3 or 4 people who said the same thing.
Mhm.
Was that your intent when you wrote the book, or did it kind of just fall like that? Because it looks like a text, even like when I said from the table of contents, the way it is, where it's divided into the 5 stages.
Yeah.
It reminded me so much of that book that we used as a
Wow.
textbook. So
Wow. So no, that's just pure like extra goodness because that wasn't my thing. Is I just wanted to tell a story.
uh,
I wanted to make it as real as possible.
yeah.
Um, I did want to make it informative. Again, going back to these preconceptions of what mental health looks like.
Hmm.
That no, mental health is not necessarily. First of all, mental health is a spectrum. So to go back a little bit, I come from a wellness model. That's what we practice. So on the wellness spectrum, you have on one end unwell and on the other end well. The beautiful thing about the spectrum is that every single person, even Jesus himself, would have fallen on the spectrum. It just depends on where
Gotcha.
you are in it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we are all on the spectrum. I love it because it doesn't discriminate. We're all on this spectrum. And so what I wanted to do is I want to break this notion that you have to be all the way unwell to be considered mental, something like mental health issue. No,
Mm-hmm.
you can be functional and still battle with some kind of mental health issue.
Right.
And so the goal was I want to make it as real as possible. I wanted to make it as relatable as possible without scaring people away. But at the same time, I wanted to, I guess you can say, put a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down. So I did want to talk
Mm-hmm.
about mental health. I did want to talk about these are what the stages of grief look like for this particular person, because
Mm-hmm.
everybody's different. Um, and so the fact that people are like, and people do come up and say, you know what, this actually needs to be in the schools. This needs to be
Mm-hmm.
like some kind of part of the curriculum. I would love that for that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That would be like a cherry on my cake. But it didn't start off that way. I just
Okay.
wanted to tell a story.
Gotcha. Okay. And you talked about suffering several losses in your life in a short period of time, something I can definitely relate to. How much of Desi's journey is colored by your journey through grief? You know what I'm saying? Like, how much of it is like, well, just go ahead. Go ahead. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. So I would say I wouldn't say it's full colored by my experience because there's some things that Desi does that I necessarily wouldn't do. There's
Right.
some things that Desi would how she was looking at things necessarily I wouldn't. But then again, my background's a little bit different. I'm a mental
Mm-hmm.
health therapist, so I was able to say, okay, Nicole, you're going through some depression right now.
Mm-hmm.
Where I know that's not necessarily always the case. However, I would say the emotions though were definitely pure and
Mm-hmm.
were definitely of my own. Um, and I did use those things. The thing is, when it comes to grief, we think death. And I use death because that's the easiest thing. To
Right.
me, it wasn't necessary. It was death, yes, because I was losing family members. But a lot of my grief started because I had the death of relationships. I had the death
Mm-hmm.
of a lot of friendships. I had the death of even job transitions. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That was the death. And so I had to come to terms. So I had to be in denial. I had to be angry. I had to
Mm-hmm.
bargain. I was depressed. And then I finally had to accept it. And so the emotions there. So, like I said, and then, like I said, the deaths also, like I said, it was like a continuation of type because I found myself recycling over some of the stages of the grief. So I would say yes and no. It's a combination, I think, of my personal things, but at the same time, I didn't want Daisy to be limited by just me. I wanted
Right.
the creativity expression to be able to say, you know what, let's do this, and still
Mm-hmm.
make it relatable. But I wanted her to navigate her own journey.
Right. Gotcha. I was gonna say, in the same vein, I know a lot of times when authors write, they use instances from their own lives and they kind of weave
Mhm.
it into the book. Did that happen? Did you find yourself like kind of plugging like this is exactly what happened to you, and you kind of put that in the
Okay.
book?
I am going to share this. So the scene where she actually, right in the beginning as a child, where she actually drowned, that's
Was she
actually
almost drowned?
she almost drowns in the
Right.
book. She's retelling
Right.
where she almost drowned. That
Mm-hmm.
actually happened to me, and
Okay.
it was as traumatic as funny as probably it was for her. So I wasn't at a lake though. I was in the pool showing off. I was like a little kid showing off, and I almost drowned. And my brother had to save me, like Desi's older
That's
sister
exactly.
had
That's
to
what I'm saying.
save
It
her.
sounds exactly like
Yeah.
what happened in the book. Yeah. That's great.
My brother almost drowned him. I was like, but I almost drowned. But yeah, after I learned how to swim after that. I said, this is not gonna be a repeat. I'm gonna learn how to
Yeah.
swim. And so that I definitely use. And that's probably the one of the only I'll have to go back and like do a mental
Uh-huh.
health on it. But yeah, that's definitely I can say I pulled in. The dog thing just because I love dogs, so I definitely want to have
Right.
a dog in there.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things I think maybe Desi's mom, she was again, she was a baker. I always, I love baking. So little
Right.
things like that, I was
Right.
like, if I was in another life, this was
Yeah.
I would do this,
Yeah.
So yeah, but that, yeah.
Those things add the personal touch. That's what makes it
You
really
gotta make
cool.
a little bit,
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you, I don't know if it was that scene necessarily, but there were some scenes where you were a lot of the grief scenes for me.
Mm,
Um, I felt them. I know I do some writing myself, fiction writing, and I've gone through grief, very similar to what you're talking about. And I know there are scenes when I start writing them, they get so real I have to take a break
gotcha. Yep.
because it gets so emotional. And some of the scenes, like particularly in the beginning, when
Mhm.
she finds her sister, that was like I was like that had to be so hard to write
Wow.
because you're feeling
Yeah.
what she's feeling in that moment and all the fears that are coming up and you have to really be in touch with your emotions to be able to write something like that.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. It was a, it was, car- it was, it was a release in a different way. So it was a release of my emotions, but it just spanned out a little bit different in the book with the things and the events that happened to her. So
Hmm.
like again, the emotions are definitely real. You mentioned that there's a scene too that people talk about, was when she first went to the grave to visit her sister. But
Hmm.
actually it was the last time she goes to the grave that I know for a fact that was my emotions in there. When she's coming acceptance, when she's
Yeah,
coming to
right.
terms, um, and she still has this woulda, coulda, shoulda, the what ifs. I wish, I wish, I wish.
Hmm.
There's sometimes, you wish you could have said this to this person. You wish you could have
Yeah.
explained this to this person. You wish, and so, but having to accept that with a bittersweetness, with that you have to be willing to cry to feel those tears. And
Hmm.
so I still to this day remember where I was when I wrote that scene. And
Hmm.
I was people thought I was like, what's going on with her? But I like to write in Barnes and Noble, and I was in Knoxville at the time, and I was in Barnes and Noble crying my butt off. I mean, boo-hoo snot tears. But
Right.
then people probably really thought something was up because then I started smiling.
Hmm.
I was crying and then I started smiling because one, it was the end of the book.
Right.
So there
Oh
was like this
yeah.
bittersweetness about it. There
Yep.
was this relief because finally, once again, everything that was in my head, I got to put out on paper. So even though it was the emotions and everything I was going through, I got to finally put that on paper. And it was kind of like I had to, I was able to release it.
Right.
It was kind of like a, okay. And so that scene actually is the one I remember the most.
Hmm.
It was definitely bittersweet. It was definitely a combination of just of the journey.
Right.
It was Desi's journey, but it was my journey too.
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah. It's funny with authors. I think you have to be an author to understand it. You talk about mourning. You mourn the characters.
Oh
You're
yeah.
like, oh man, I just spent all this time with these people and now they're gone, and you miss them. You start to miss the time you spent with them and being because when you're writing, you're just following their journey, and it's like, oh, my friends are gone. It's like,
Yeah.
oh man.
Thank you for saying that because I think yeah, people don't understand that because what they
Hmm.
don't see is that no, these are real people. In some
Right.
sense, these are real people. Like they're like, well, how did you think? I was like, it goes to a point. I call it the sweet spot when all of a sudden, um, it just flows. Well, it's not me talking; it's my character talking now.
Hmm.
And it's literally, well, what would Daisy do? Well, Daisy gonna do this. What is,
Hmm.
that's when you really start to understand your characters and stuff. And so, yes, you
Hmm.
form a relationship with
Yep.
these people, and you're like, oh, and like, oh, this person, you you remind me of Daisy. Who's it? Oh, this, this person.
I know. That's
you
great.
know?
Yep.
But no, these are, and you do grow attached. Part of it too, with this particular book, it was my first book. And so this was my first experience. What do I do? What happens after this? So I agreed the ending of it because I'm like, what do I do? And two, it was, can I do this again? Can I
Mm-hmm.
repeat the same success? Can I write another story? Was this just a one hit wonder kind of, or can I do this again? So yeah, you actually do go through. I mean, it's like a relationship. You develop a
Yes.
relationship. This is my first book, but I've written other novels too, and you go through like, yeah, the process of, I guess, would it be
Hmm.
a breakup? Is it a breakup? No, it's a.
It's almost no name for it
It's
because
yeah.
there's nothing like it in life where you have these people that just kind of fade into oblivion.
Yes, it's the end of the road by Boys to Men. I'm gonna start playing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start playing it at the end of each scene.
I tell you, my wife thinks I'm crazy. I'll tell her when I'm writing when my characters surprise me,
Yeah.
and she's like, "They're in your head." I'm like, "I don't know how to explain it, but you'll be writing and they'll do something, and you'll be like, wow, I didn't see that coming."
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Because
but
you let it take over. It's like,
yeah,
what? Like, why you say that? Like, yeah, you're actually. I
yeah,
can't believe she said that one. You
yeah,
actually got the pick. No, it's yeah. I completely get it. It's yeah.
yeah.
You let it
I think
take
you,
over. Yeah.
I think you have to be in it to understand it. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, going more to what we're talking about on the show and talking to people about following their passion. You're somebody who has obviously followed their passion and you're finding success, and more importantly, you're just loving life.
Yeah.
Because when you get to do what you want to do, it's fantastic. Like you said, it's almost no effort.
Yeah.
So, how important do you feel it is for people to do what they love, to pursue their passion?
I think that if you truly want to experience your own individual life, you have no choice. Everybody, I'm very, very firm to believe that everybody has their own unique gifts, talents. You mentioned, and I completely believe in this concept too, that if we were all living our best life, so not to be cliche, but if we were all doing what we were called to do, it wouldn't be a lot. There wouldn't be a lot. It wouldn't be jealousy because you're doing you and I'm doing me, right?
Hmm.
We have to get into that concept, and until we do, um you owe it to yourself. My thing is, when it really started hitting home, I think the older I get, the more I realize how precious life is. I only
Hmm.
have this life, and now, and two, I think now that I got a taste of what it is, I don't want to go back. you know like, once you get a taste of some good water, you don't want that, a good steak, you don't want that, you don't want a hamburger. Once you get a taste of how it could be, it's like this. I can't go back. Like, part
Right,
of me just wouldn't. It would feel unnatural if I were to do anything else. It
right.
flows. It's a part of me. Not to say I'm not going to paint this as rose colored. Like, every day is a good day. Um, it's hard.
Hmm.
It's hard. It takes energy, but it takes a different kind of energy. So I'm still exerting the energy. It's just coming out differently, where it's not forced, it flows, but at the same time, it's still energy being exerted. I'm
Right.
tired, you know. You have to put in a lot of work behind this. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I have so much, I got to say, I have so much respect for entrepreneurs. I have so much respect for people who are living their calling and doing what they do to fulfill them, because one, you're already sticking out. It's so easy to fit in. I
Hmm.
realize it's hard to go against the mode, and so I
Right.
have to give that I have to, because I'm just meeting so many different people, and I'm just like, you know what, I respect your grind,
Hmm.
because it don't come easy. This ain't
Right.
something that's overnight. This is something that you have to work at, especially when things get hard, especially when you're unsure, especially when, you know what, it's getting a little bit rough, you know.
Hmm.
I did not I it wasn't in my first notion. I enjoyed my previous job. I loved the company I worked with. I loved
Hmm.
my boss. Not a lot of people can say they love their boss, right? I
Hmm.
love my boss. I love the people I worked with. I really enjoyed my environment, but to be called out to do something different, um, it was a scare. And not only that, is I had to adjust to when it didn't look right. I'm thinking, oh, I'm getting called out and I'm really going to pursue my passions. Oh, it's going to be like, it's going to be, oh, popping bottles of champagne every day. No, no, it's going to be a lot of sacrifice. It's going to be a lot of losing probably people in your life who they just
You
don't
don't get
understand.
it.
They don't get it. That, I think, was the toughest part, was having to having really, really wonderful, and these are wonderful people too,
Hmm.
having to end and part ways with certain people who were not conducive to what I was trying to do and to my vision and to just supporting me. Um, so I don't want to paint this picture like everything is just wonderful. You have to work. You have to work
Hmm.
to do your passion. Your passion is, you have to actually put in effort. But at the same time, I can't see any other way. I
Right.
could not see me doing any other because it gives back to me. I
Mm-hmm.
find at the end of the day, especially when I finish a chapter, nothing like I haven't pictured maybe a slice of pecan pie, but not but I ain't got that nothing gives me this type of like joy, you know.
Right.
So
Hmm.
yeah.
I know. I don't remember the chapter and verse, but Paul talks about going down his road and preaching the gospel,
Mm,
and he says basically his words are, "Woe unto me is if I don't preach the gospel."
mm,
In other words, like a lot of times people will be like, "Oh, you're such a great person. You're doing this. You're doing that." It's like you don't understand. If
mm,
I wasn't doing what you
mm,
see me doing,
mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be me. I wouldn't be complete. And
Yes.
it's a compulsion.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just I'm a wonderful guy. No, this is what God put on me. And
Yes.
if I'm not carrying the cross that He gave me to carry, then I'm not being who I'm supposed to be, and I can't enjoy
And
life. I can't have that joy.
yeah. And we're all, and that the beauty about that is we all have that. We all
Right.
have a purpose. We all have this passion. That's what makes us unique. You can see people who are operating in what they do. Comes natural. To me, what comes to mind is your Michael Jacksons and your Beyoncés.
Hmm.
You can tell they're in their calling. You can
Yeah.
tell they're
It's
doing what
easy to
they need.
see.
It's easy to see.
Right.
And and so that's something that I like. I want to be able to operate like that. Sure enough, again, you see the amount of work it took to get there. Michael Jackson took him
Hmm.
forever. He was always constantly perfecting his craft, right?
Right.
Beyonce always perfecting her craft. So again, there's a lot of work in perfecting your craft. However, that joy and that passion, it just flows. I would not be me. I would not be who you see if somehow that was removed from me, you know?
Right.
So yeah, exactly.
That's really cool. All right. What would you tell someone who was living a life where they weren't pursuing their passions? Like, what advice would you give them?
Um, One, and maybe this is the therapist in me,
Hmm.
I would question now, here's the thing. We try to dance around the why question, not necessarily ask why, but ask what's leading you to not do so. What? So my things, I kind of like to get into the psyche of a person who does not, because it's like a fish. You don't put a fish in the air. You don't put a bird in the
Right.
water, right? A fish
Right.
was designed to swim in the water. A bird was designed to fly in the air. So to not do that, you're going against the natural fabric of who you are, right? And so my
Mm.
question, and maybe like again, maybe it's a therapist in me, is like, what's surrounding this? What's preventing you? What's stopping you from? And what is it that's kind of like a factor that's kind of preventing you from doing that? And how can we work around it? Um, and two, I like to say, imagine um, imagine, and this is, I call it the magic wand thing. So, like, if you had a magic
Mm.
wand and you could do anything, what would it do? What would it be? And how would you feel? Um, and that's how I would try to motivate somebody to get into their passion. Two, though, I will also say take the feelings out of it, because a passion, first of all, you have to think about it. Sometimes you have to psych yourself into going to your job, right? A traditional job, right?
Right.
You have to psych yourself. A passion, even when I don't feel like it, I still do it, which is really weird because it's just ingrained. It's just something I do. Like I breathe, I do, I write. I work with people. That's just something that I
Hmm.
just do. And so, what I would encourage somebody to do is imagine a life where you could operate at your highest, your best. You would be completely fulfilled. It would challenge you, but it would be to make you a better person. And then I said, what would that be? Okay. Then what are we going to, like, what's stopping you from doing that? How can you start today? What's one thing you can do to take that step to go closer to that? Um, Again, I'm a firm believer that we all have a purpose. I need your gift. I can't do what you do. You can't do
Right.
what I do. We need each other. And so a lot of times too, I say, which is think about that person who may be dependent on you. Somebody needs you. If that too doesn't encourage you, but think about what you could be doing for yourself. Think about that feeling that you could be blessing yourself with, that fulfillment, that joy, the unadulterated joy where you know what, I'm living the best life I can. Wouldn't that motivate you? You know,
Mm.
so that's something that I would toss out more of a questioning thing. I want them to process this,
Right.
and then I say do it. The advice I would give to people who are pursuing it is be willing to sacrifice. That's one thing I have to say is be willing to sacrifice, and be flexible. Um, Kind of come in with the vision you see because no one can do the vision like you can, but be willing to be flexible too. In the journey to accomplish that vision, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I have the vision in mind. I know exactly what I see. I know exactly what I want. However, at the same time, I had to be really flexible on how I got there. It didn't necessarily happen at the time, and I wanted to. It didn't necessarily look like, as far as like the steps I had to take in, the drawbacks and the setbacks. I wasn't planning for those things, and I had to adjust. So being willing to work for it, to sacrifice. Are you willing to go without? I realize that a lot of times it's so easy actually to remain in the bubble because it's hard to actually step out because there is a lot of sacrifice. You get the reward is so great, but be willing to sacrifice. Are you willing to go without? I would say I used to love going out. I used to love going out. You know, don't go out. Don't do a lot of going out. you know, um, I used to enjoy live music. I used to enjoy a lot of things. I had to pull back. I used to, there's a lot of things that I had to sacrifice. There's a lot of late nights. There's a lot of, I can't do that because I got to do this. You know what? I can't give to that because I got to invest in this. There's a lot of things that you have to sacrifice. And sometimes that includes people. And I will say, be very vigilant on who you allow into your space. Um, I look at my vision as my baby. You should, everybody it is your baby. You wouldn't let just anybody take care of your baby. You wouldn't let just anybody around your children, right? Same way with a vision. You
Right.
can't let just anyone. And again, it's not like bad people. These are not like evil spawn of Satan type people. No, they just don't get it. And they may be trying to be supportive, and they actually may be your stumbling block. Be very, very vigilant about protecting your vision, your platform, and your voice. Nobody can do what you do.
Yeah.
So,
I would see it like I always see it like I compare it to the NFL.
okay.
My mom is a fantastic person. I love my mom to death. I would never in a million years start her on my NFL football team. She just doesn't have the talent. And it's the
Right.
same thing when you're talking about your vision. It's not about, like you said, it's not about a person being evil. It's
Right.
about certain people just aren't conducive to to moving your vision forward.
Yeah.
And you don't have to see them as evil, but you do have to understand that your vision is who you are. That's your legacy. That's that's going to outlast you once you're gone.
Yes.
And it's important enough that you may have to push people aside or distance yourself from people who otherwise are great people,
Yeah.
but they hinder your vision.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. We have to get to the point where we realize there's nothing wrong with that. You're not doing
Right.
anything bad. They aren't either. It's just a practical thing.
Right. Right.
So,
And that's actually what happened. How I remember there was a particular friendship I had. I was like, I think I may have to distance myself. And I was telling us, I think I may have to distance myself because I got my image to think of. And at the same time, like I wasn't Beyonce, I wasn't anything, but I was thinking it's you have to have, when it comes to vision, you have to think, you can't just be thinking about the present. I'm thinking 10, 20, 30 years down the line. I'm thinking about this legacy, right? Too, exactly.
right.
And so how that ended up shaping up is, I had to be very mindful on certain friendships, and then trying to explain it to some people. I was like, I'm not going to explain it. You're not going to get it. I'm not going to waste my breath. I just know this is what it is. But yeah, so yeah, just like it's not about being evil or not. I say conducive. A term we use in counseling is it functional? If it's functional, meaning it's conducive to my growth, to my progress. If it's not, that means it's dysfunctional. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It just means it's not conducive to where I'm trying to be. I can't have that amount. I cannot, I can't have weeds in the garden I'm trying to plant.
Right. That's a good way of putting it. That's a good analogy. Yeah.
It don't matter what age you are, what you're passionate about. If you really feel it, go ahead and do it. Because if you don't, you only got one life. You only got one, time to do this thing.
Join me next week when my guest will be rap and R&B recording artist Bobby Banks.
So now I want to come back to you. Okay. What are you working on now? What are your current projects you're working on?
Working on the sequel. That's definitely I have to speak
Okay.
there. I am working on the sequel. There is the ending was the ending I wanted. However, there's some clarifications I need to make. And I will go ahead and say it because I'm putting it out there. Um, Spoiler alert, just in case anybody hadn't. So it's going to be on Leland, who is one of the characters in the book, just because I want to explain her. I'm not. I'm a believer that there's not necessarily a good evil person, necessarily. I think we all have the ability to make good or bad choices. And I wanted to explain her a little bit more. I wanted to kind of not to excuse anything. Again, the therapist in me is all about accountability. Leland made some really not so good decisions, especially when it came to some of her friendships. However, it's so easy to cast somebody as a bad person. I didn't want to have any villains necessarily in my books. I don't believe in villains. I believe everybody. I came across a quote, something along the lines of, a villain is just a person who hasn't shared their story, you know? And so I was like, you know what? Let me roll with that because there's more to Leland that I think. And what's so interesting is that everybody who's read it, they've been so quick to be like, oh, Leland, except this one lady, bless her heart, loved this woman. She broke my book down, okay? I'm like, oh my goodness. I mean, she broke it all the way down. And she was the only one who was sympathetic to Leland. And I think that's the therapist in me, because I see people who, to me, they're humans, but outside, they may have a bad rap. They may be perceived, in their circle as, oh, that's the bad apple. But to me, they're human. And so I think the therapist in me wanted to share a little bit more, but also to give hope. So I'm working on that right now. I want to explain Leland a little bit more. And just around, so what I do, so I do want to back up. So, licensed professional counselor. So I am licensed to do counseling. I switched over to really write. However, I do volunteer. I still do offer my services free counseling. However, I do contract work now. So that's as far as, so I work with organizations, whoever wants to contract me, and I offer a variety of like speaking engagements, workshops, do a lot of workshops, especially for my teen girls. I'm gearing up, preparing for a workshop in the next few weeks where we're going to talk about just different things. I talk about bullying, so I call it Mean Girls. That's kind of the phenomenon. We deal with self-esteem, we deal with depression, we deal with coping skills, so I do a lot of workshops, again, to teen girls. So those are pretty much the two main babies that I do at the moment.
Okay. So, where are you headed in the future past this? Like you were talking about,
Oh, the vision's big. I do want to continue as far as my books, I want my books to be quality reading that still gives you a nugget of wisdom, that still encourages you to be transparent, that still encourages you to be you. And so I would love for my books to be in the schools, to be in as an educational, that would be like a good read. So not only is it, a reading that they have to do, but it's also one that I'm hopeful that they will find enjoyable, but it's still informative at the same time. So definitely and really just expanding the line. There are more books in me. In fact, it does not fail. Whenever I'm working on one book, I already got the download for the next book. And so I really wanted to hurry up with this sequel because I literally have the next book that's just like, and so I'm a pen and paper type girl. So I rock a pen and paper. I'm old school all the way. And so I keep a pen and paper because it's not uncommon for me as I'm working on one book. All of a sudden I get a download for something like, this is a conversation or this is a scene, and I don't want to miss it. So I do write that. So I do have more books in me. My goal is I want to continue to build our girls up. Again, I love working with teen girls. And I want to empower our girls, this next generation, to take more of an assertive role when it comes to their mental wellness, as it relates to their identity, their self-esteem, their self-care. So I really want to continue working with our local girls in our city, because I want them to be empowered to, you know what, to embrace all aspects, all beautiful aspects of themselves,
Hmm.
the good and the bad. So my biggest thing is I'm all about taking off the mask, being transparent on where we are in our journeys, and if it's not necessarily the the prettiest scene, still show it, still be transparent in what you're going through. Continue with the mental health advocacy by doing that too, just because firm believer that more people are probably dealing with life than they care to, to
Hmm.
share. And so if we actually were to come together and stop attacking, but start like embracing, um, we may find some surprise supports. People who we never thought was going through something, they may be able to, drop some nuggets of wisdom on us. And so
Hmm.
that's my biggest thing, is I want to continue with this transparency, because it does lead to just an overall better self-esteem. So that's what I'm doing, right? That's my goal.
Oh, that's really cool, man. All right, I'm going to say this one more time because I love it so much. In order to feel tears of joy, you must be willing to cry. Love
Yeah.
that quote. I love that quote. I put quotes on Instagram every day. I think that one's might find its way on my Instagram page. That's a really
Oh,
great quote.
yes.
All
Thank
right.
you.
You can find CN Nash online at her website, thecnnash.com. She's also online on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm going to put links on this video so you can link to her and find her. Go buy Mirroring Effect. You want to read this book. It is fantastic. Thank you so much for being on my show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been, I like, this has been so much fun. Like, I've done interviews. You're like, this flows on you. Okay. I want
I
you to know
appreciate
that.
it.
Like,
I
you're
appreciate it.
really, really, this has been